joined now by Chasten Buttigieg. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So we're enmeshed in this whole second iteration of our SignalGate scandal. Obviously, Mike Walls was just let go from the administration as the result of his involvement in all of this. I'm curious, when you had your correspondence with Pete when he was in the White House, how seriously did they take security? How seriously did they take official correspondence? How often did he discuss imminent war plans with you at the dinner table?
Was he let go from the administration though? Because wasn't he nominated for UN ambassador?
That's true. If you think Donald Trump gives half a shit about the UN, like that is effectively.
It's just so sad for America. It's like you're getting kicked out of the White House and the administration because you handled classified information so poorly.
And so we're
going to send you to
represent the United States in front of the entire world.
The entire world,
yeah.
So bad. Yeah. No, we talk about war plans all the time over dinner. You know, it's very common. No, it is mind-boggling the things that they get away with there and that they call normal. You know, there would be multiple times where I'd ask Pete, like, oh, where are you going again tomorrow? And it's like, oh, I can't tell you. You know, if there was like something happening in a secure location or they were working on something with a problem and I would see him like frustrated about some like phone calls and texts that he was working on. And I would say like, what's going on? Because you want to like help as the spouse. Yeah. He's like, I can't talk about it. I literally can't talk about it. And apparently like Hegseth's wife is just like joining him in all of his meetings.
Right. Forget not talking about it. He's like, come on in. I'll read you in.
Right.
You let us know where you think the Houthis would be.
Can you imagine? Imagine how Fox News would handle it if it's like Chasten Buttigieg joins his husband Pete in the Roosevelt Room. Chasten Buttigieg, reads classified information to his children at bedtime.
Was it Brett Baer who literally questioned Pete for the Invictus Games?
Yes.
And so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Pete led a presidential delegation to the Invictus Games, which is an athletic competition amongst wounded war veterans. And Pete led the delegation. It was in the Netherlands. And typically the person who leads the delegation brings their spouse. So I went to the Netherlands to see the Invictus Games and meet with wounded American warriors. And at that time, Pete also had some meetings with the Ukrainian delegation. It was really cool and very impactful for me to feel like I was representing my country at such a high level. And then when we came back, some folks on the right decided to lean into the story that Pete had taken his spouse to I think they called it a sporting event on a private airplane. So typically when you lead a delegation, you take an American aircraft. It was not a private airplane. I wasn't like, flying around with Beyonce going to a basketball
But at the same time, they don't stick you on an American Airlines flight,
Correct.
In 32B. And...
No, it's also surprising when you're going with, senators and legislators, the amount of coordination that takes and the amount of staff that involves, also just on a security level.
Right.
But he famously called out Pete and asked if he was going to pay back the taxpayer for taking me on that trip. Which multiple people had done before take their
with their own spouses. Correct.
Right. And I remember I tweeted at them. I asked if this was going to be a thing, when the new administration came in and they were doing this, or when Sean Duffy was, flying his kids to the Indy 500 or something.
That's right.
It's like these are oftentimes normal things that happen during an administration. It just seems to be one-sided. And the hypocrisy is one thing that's kind of been like driving me nuts, that they screamed fraud, right, and abuse for 4 years when they came in, and yet they go in and they just bring their spouses to confidential meetings and share confidential information on an unsecured app. Apparently his phone number can just be found on the internet, and I mean, like, I have sat through security briefings, like what to do with my device and our devices and, how to keep our family safe. So it's just mind-boggling that they just get away with so much.
On a more personal note, what is it like to not be told? Like, I understand logically speaking that if your spouse tells you that they can't tell you something because it's classified or whatever, but then there has to be a more human level where it's like, the whole relationships are built on trust, right? And so like or openness or being communicative, and is it weird to get used to this idea that your spouse is actively hiding something. And granted, it's not malicious, but the reality is that you're not being told something that they know, and they just aren't.
You wear a lot of different hats as a political spouse.
Yeah.
It's always on a personal level. Like, I want to help. You're going through something. You're frustrated. how can I help? And, I guess that's what sets him apart from some people in this administration, is that I cannot discuss this with you. It's classified. And, you have to kind of learn to just say, okay, I hope it gets better. Whatever's happening.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like,
there.
in that sense, it's a little bit of a relief, because then there's no pressure on you to do anything.
To solve the problem. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, just more broadly, zooming out on this exact topic, we obviously just sat through an entire election cycle where the principal targets of the Republicans' ire were the entire LGBT community.
Sure.
And so, granted, it was especially focused on the trans community. But I'm just curious how that manifests it for somebody who, in your position, obviously a member of the LGBT community, to be able to kind of feel like the biggest punching bag in America right now is, folks in your community.
Yeah. Well, I certainly don't feel like I'm the biggest punching bag. You're absolutely right that trans Americans definitely are getting their unfair share of hate. As someone in the community, you always want to stick up for other people in your community, and just make sure that they're okay. And so on one level, you're trying to do the right amount of work to let people in your community know that you're there for them. And then, on the other hand, you're trying to do political work because you're trying to win an election, or you're trying to, move the ball forward. So you're trying to have conversations with your neighbors about how really you need to stop bullying trans people, and we need to start having conversations about how we're going to make childcare more affordable, how we're going to make healthcare more affordable. So you're kind of juggling a lot there. And I think it just kind of speaks to their focus on things that don't affect everyday Americans. That it's easier to make trans people the boogeyman than it is to talk about why they're making it harder to raise children in this country. Like right now, we're putting 145% tariffs on China. A lot of baby items come from China: strollers, car seats. The White House is screaming, have more kids, have more kids. They're trying to find a way to pay people to have kids, while they're trying to cut Head Start, kick nearly 1 million kids out of their child care. Grocery prices are going up, and now your strollers and your car seats are going to be much more expensive. So they don't want to talk about those things, because those are really hard things to talk about. Those are policy conversations. Sometimes those are nuanced conversations. So what we want to do is just focus on one person, or one very, very, very small group of people, and make them the boogeyman.
Yeah.
Like in Michigan, I'm pretty sure the number of kids who have petitioned the state athletic association to play on a team is like less than 2.
Yeah. Right.
In an entire state. But
so
they would rather talk about those 2 kids, right, than things that are going to make your life more affordable or easier.
Do you think that the American people more broadly kind of, I don't want to say learn their lesson about kind of allowing ourselves, I'll throw myself in, even though I wouldn't include myself in this, but allowing ourselves to be distracted by these marginal issues? I mean, to your exact point, we're talking about less than 10 people in the entirety of the NCAA.
Yeah.
Versus now, I mean, we're thrust into economic turmoil. The United States economy has contracted, even as other economies across the world have expanded, and yet this is all predicated on the fact that Donald Trump won the election because he was so effective at shining a spotlight on just a handful of people. And now look at where we are, because we allowed ourselves to be distracted by the trans issue. And yet when you have somebody who's in office who is so incompetent, so incapable, that he's voluntarily ushering in a recession, do you feel like, okay, maybe we allowed ourselves to be distracted this time, but moving forward, maybe not fall for the culture war issue so easily?
Well, I think maybe some people were distracted by it and only wanted to focus on it. And I think some other people just didn't have the guts to talk about it, maybe because they were scared. A lot of people in America have never met a trans person. Yeah. Right? Maybe they felt like they were walking on eggshells and they didn't want to hurt anybody. They didn't want to say the wrong thing. But they didn't want to speak up when somebody at the dinner table at a family gathering said something really harmful or maybe untrue. And so I think something that the trans community could use, but also just Democrats at large could use, is people calling bullshit. Yeah. And don't be afraid to push back. And it's kind of awkward when, especially I'm from the Midwest, so it's pretty difficult to call BS at a family function. But when someone is focused on a small minority of people, but not focused on the things right in front of them that affect their life or the lives of people in their family, you gotta refocus the spotlight on the things that truly matter. And I think some people just weren't maybe confident enough to speak up and say, actually, here's what I think. Or I think you're getting that wrong. It's really hard to do that to someone you love or someone you trust. But I think Democrats would be served well if we just kind of said it with our whole chest.
Yeah.
Like call out the BS. And also, like, I think what Tim Waltz got really, he did well on was calling things weird. It is weird to focus on, 10 kids in the United States of America,
Right.
when there are families in our community back home in Michigan who are struggling to put food on the table, who are struggling to figure out how they can go to work full time and then pay for the rising cost of childcare.
Yeah.
Those are the things that they want to know about. But yet we're spending all this time responding to the hatred coming from the right, when we really should just be talking about how to make people's lives better.
And I do think that we're going to get to a moment right now where everybody kind of feels silly for having allowed that to consume so much time. In a moment right now where I mean, again, like Trump is voluntarily ushering in so much calamity of the entire Republican conference, enabling him because they're collectively too chicken shit to actually push back on anything that he's doing. And so kind of in retrospect, the fact that we spent so much energy, so much airtime in this country attacking some marginalized community really does feel like the bait and switch that it was. Let's talk about the beard. How
what a switch.
Yeah, I just wanted to go with that seamless transition there. How did the beard come about, and how much of a say did you have to have before he was allowed to really show it off?
No, I think Pete grew a beard like way back in 2017 or something when we were on vacation. And then he had a beard when the kids were born. And both times I've seen the beard, I was like, I like the beard. I think you should keep the beard. And so I am encouraging the beard. I like the beard. Yeah.
Do you feel like we're in a moment right now because things are just, things are a little bit looser in politics? You can curse now. You can say whatever you want. You can be normal human beings. That the beard is actually a positive. That the beard actually.
I don't know. I guess jury's out. I swear to God,
well, because
everywhere
normally,
I go, it's like someone has an opinion about the beard.
Yeah, I mean, normally everybody is really well kept and clean shaven, and that I mean, I hate to point to Ted Cruz as the trendsetter here, but I mean, he was like Ted Cruz had his Wolverine beard first. There's other folks
good for him.
Yeah, so tell us about your new book that you just wrote and why you decided to write it.
Oh, I wrote a children's book called Papa's Coming Home. It comes out on May 20th. And really, I wrote it because there aren't a lot of books like it. When our kids were born, I was asking around for books with families that looked like ours. Just wanted a day in the life book with two dads. So my kids could see themselves in a book, and there aren't a ton. And I was flying home from a work gig one day and just thought about how excited I was to come home to them, and how excited they might be, or like these characters might be, that one of their dads was coming home. So it's a super cute book. The kids are super excited to go to the airport, pick up their other dad, and they think that he's going to miss everything. So they, packed the minivan full of signs and flowers and a cake and his slippers and his books and like his favorite cheese. And in the end, it's the dad saying, I like these things, but the best part about coming home is you.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted, was just one, for my kids to see themselves in the book, and then two, just a book about unconditional love.
And that's the thing I wanted to ask is like, I think a lot of portrayals of same-sex couples in the media often focus on the fact that they're same-sex as the defining characteristic in their lives. But in fact, I'm sure you and Pete don't just talk about being a same-sex couple all day, and it's like that's what your whole life
especially is about. At bedtime. Because no, I think there's room for every type of book, right? It's the great thing about the library or the bookstore. But I didn't want to always be reading books that reflected our family, that were kind of punching you in the face with a moral.
Right.
I was like, it's okay to be different. Everybody's family is different, but I didn't always want to be talking about difference. I just wanted the kids to follow along in a story and say like, oh, that looks like me.
Yeah.
Or it looks like our family. Where in the end, it's not saying it's okay that you're different.
Yeah. Right.
I just wanted a sweet story.
How have the kids reacted? And I know they're young, so this might be moot. But how have they reacted to just seeing instances where your kind of family is actually portrayed in the media and movies and books?
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is like our kids don't they don't see us on television. They're watching the news.
Yeah, so it's healthy.
They helped write this book kind of in a way. So I started writing it 2 years ago. So they saw like early art. I would test run some stories on them, see what story like piqued their interest. They're really into storytelling at bed. Actually, we read books, but we also tell stories.
Yeah.
So I'll like tell part of the story and they'll fill in the gap. So they were really helpful. with this one. I'm just hopeful that we have more books like this in the future. Every family looks different. And one of the best parts about reading this book to my kids is the fact that they see themselves in it and they love it. And at the end of the day, it's not telling them that they're different. And they're not going to bed thinking about why they might be different or what other families are like. That we just laughed together reading a good story.
Well, again, the book is called Papa's Coming Home, so highly recommend head to the post description of this video and grab a copy of it. And Chasten, finally, let's finish off with this. If I'm not mistaken, Pete is headed to Iowa on May 13th. So, of course, with that comes the obvious question. Anything you want to break on Pete's behalf here? Or is there a reason that he's going to Iowa? Or how are you dealing with the incoming questions about the prospect of...
I think he just wanted to get the breakfast pizza, man. It's really
that
good.
is a very evasive answer.
I think what he's doing with Vote Vets is really cool.
And that's what the event is for.
Yeah, he's working with Vote Vets to highlight some of the disastrous decisions that have been made, especially for veterans out of this administration. Obviously, Iowa was really good to our family. And I think he'll be happy to be amongst friends. But also we just need to keep showing up in places where folks might not expect to see Democrats, especially at a national level right now. But when you mentioned that, I was like, crap, is he in Iowa? I can't stay on top of his schedule. Yeah. So I'm happy for him. I love seeing him out there. And as someone whose heart hurts just seeing what's going on in our country, it can be a difficult thing.
Yeah.
You know, as the person who always wants him home and who always wants him around the house and with the kids and helping with the laundry and stuff. But I'm also really proud of him and really happy that he's out there.
Well, I know as a part-time Fox News viewer, I am also happy that he's out there because when we in the rare instances where he actually breaks through the conservative media bubble, and in the instance where he went on Andrew Schultz's show, Flagrant, I mean, which is one of the top-rated episodes in the country right now. I mean, good on him for going through and figuring out new ways to reach audiences that we haven't reached before. So, Chasten, again, appreciate your time.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you.